If this goes on, don't panic. Bringing hope to the world through speculative fiction.
Hello and welcome to If This Goes On, Don't Panic. Today we have authors Tade Thompson and Paul Jessup. I do not have a co-host today, which is highly unusual. And even more unusually, I have two authors with me. As our audience knows, we usually only do one author at a time, unless it's a live episode. And this isn't a live episode. So today is going to be a very interesting experiment. And so we'll see how it goes. So I'll keep this intro short, but there's one thing I do want to say very quickly. We do have a surprise coming for our audience very soon. Hopefully, we will be able to unveil that in March. However, sometimes these things take time. So, start paying attention around the March, April timeframe. We'll try to let you all know as best as we can. All right. That said, let's get to our interviewees. Be right back. Okay, and we're back. Today we have Tade Thompson. Tade Thompson is a writer of novels, short stories, and screenplays. He is a fellow of the Royal Society for Literature and the vice president of the British Science Fiction Society. He is best known for Rosewater and the Murders of Molly Southbourne. He has won the Arthur C. Clarke Award, the Namo Award, the Kitschy's Gold Tentacle Award, and the Utopialis Award, and the Julia Verlange Award, among others. He has been a Hugo Award and Shirley Jackson Award finalist, and he was born in London to Yoruba parents, and he lives on the south coast of England. So welcome, Tade.
Hi. Nice to be here.
Awesome. We also have Paul Jessup again, returning very quickly back to the podcast, probably our quickest turnaround ever for a guest. Paul is a best-selling video game designer and award-winning short fiction writer, an active pro member at the HWA. His book, Glass House, is out now from Underland Press. He also has another new book out called The Skinless Man Counts to 5 and Other Stories of the Macabre. He also has stuff in Apex Magazine, Clark's World, Nightmare, Inner Zone, Pseudopod, and more. Welcome, Paul.
Hello. The pleasure is all yours.
Very nice, very nice. Over the break, they were complaining that they weren't the surprise for the audience. So, surprise, everybody. Paul is back very quickly. And we have Tade Thompson, which is a huge, surprise for me. I mean, I love Tade's work.
Surprise. Picture me bursting out of a cake.
We had no idea Tade was going to be here. He just showed up on the link somehow. I don't even know how we got it.
He's awesome like that. He just appears.
Yes. I haunt cyberspace.
Tade is actually an AI. What
would be strange is if, this thing goes up and then you get an email from the real Tade Thompson saying, that wasn't me.
Hey guys, I missed the podcast. I had an emergency happen. Sorry about that. Can we reschedule?
Okay. So this is weird because I recently, because I have multiple sclerosis, I get home infusions, my medication, and we just recently switched to home infusions rather than doing it in the hospital. And so I've been talking to this nurse off and on. I'm going to come, blah, 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 blah. So the day she comes here and stuff, and I'm sitting there and I'm about ready, I've got the needle in and everything else in the port. And I get a phone call and it's my nurse asking when it's okay for her to come over. And I'm like, well, I'm already getting it. There's a nurse here. So I was like, holy crap, I'm in a horror novel.
Wait, who is this?
It turns out they double booked it. Okay,
well, that's good, because the idea of you having a ghostly nurse.
I freaked out for a minute there, and neither of my nurses are horror fans, so they didn't get why I was freaking out. They're like, well, this happens all the time. I'm like, but you don't understand.
That is funny.
Yeah.
And freaky. I mean, you wake up in a tub, no kidneys, that kind of a thing, So I have lots of questions for you guys. So many questions, so many things to get through. One thing I wanted to start with, you both are writers who like to push literary boundaries, in my opinion. Paul, you and I kind of talked about this a little bit last time that you were on. Tade, you've mentioned in interviews before that, you're tired of the 3-act story and that sort of thing. And just to give our audience one example, your novel, Far From Light of Heaven,
I love that.
being a murder mystery, is also kind of structurally different, right? Which is something that I noticed right away while reading it. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Then I went and read an interview with you, a fairly recent interview, when you mentioned that you wanted the pacing to be like a rock thrown into the air, like going up and then coming back down very quickly.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Why is it so important for... Go ahead.
No, please, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, why is it so important for you both to push those kinds of boundaries? Tade, why don't you go first?
Well, first of all, when it comes to receiving stories, because you could read it, you could listen to it, you could watch it on TV, you could follow it on a video game, you could read a comic. I mean, there's so many ways of, let's just call it receiving stories. In order to do that, the audience is actually trained, or I could use the word auto-trained. They train themselves because they've been trained by stories they heard as kids, sometimes from their parents, sometimes from school teachers, by the books they've read, by the stories, by the movies they've watched and everything. So they have already imbibed a particular kind of structure. For me, what that structure does is it makes certain things expected or expectable. They know to expect, okay, we're now in the midpoint. Okay, this is where, this is the all is lost moment. Okay, everything's going to go really, really bad. And then everything will be fine in the end, or not fine, but this is where the whole thing is resolving. Mm-hmm. And there's comfort in that because, you come to expect it and all that, but it's not the only way to tell stories. And I like there to be some degree of anything can happen in the stories that I tell. I like people to think, okay, well, I'm not entirely sure where this is going, but I like it. If they will trust me, I will lead them to the end of the story, but I want them to feel like literally anything could happen at any time. And that will be me gripping them until they let go. And hopefully that will be an interesting experience for them. If it's not interesting, I don't, because I am first and foremost a reader myself. So I don't want things to be predictable. I don't want to know what I'm reading or about to read. I don't want to know it. I want to just read it and be pleasantly surprised as I go along. I don't like it when I can predict what's about to happen and then find that, yeah, I'm right. I don't like that. I enjoy surprise. I enjoy things to be different. And that's what I try to write. And that's one of the reasons why I haven't done these very long book series, like 7 or 8 book series. I don't do those things. I really, Rosewater, for example, I actually wanted to be one gigantic book, to be honest with you. And I like to write things that are standalone and each to be different from the other. I just want to do things that are different, basically.
Yeah. Well,
I do like what you said there before about like using that kind of unexpected structure to keep the reader glued. Like it's its own form of suspense because they don't know what's going to happen next. So like they're constantly surprised. I mean, I like that idea. I need to think about that actually, because that's really interesting. Mostly why I write in like, I guess you could call them non-traditional structures is because like I grew up on not just reading like and watching like contemporary science fiction, fantasy, that sort of thing too, but my parents raised me on a lot of classic literature as well, which was before any of that structure was set in stone, as well as like literary books, things like that. And literary novels and short stories and things don't follow like what we consider the normal structure, like in our genres, There's not that same freight text pyramid, all that stuff. They move at a different pace, which I think is why a lot of genre fans don't like literary books, is because they're not used to the structure, because their structures are more, I guess, languidly placed. It's more internal rather than external. And I think that being raised in that sort of thing, that definitely helped a lot with that sort of thing. Also reading a lot of classic science fiction and fantasy growing up, because I grew up like in the late 70s, early 80s, like Star Wars as a kid, because it came out the year I was born. So how could you not? And that led me after like science fiction, fantasy, but everything in the library was like from the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s. They had no contemporary stuff. And so like I was introduced to a lot of just older structures, stranger structures before we started really getting into like the whole monomyth of the hero being everywhere and in everything, which I think these days it's kind of a pity. We've seen so many people that especially in America, that's all they know. And so when something doesn't follow the monomyth of the hero, they get upset, they get confused, they don't understand what's going on. Like they don't get the structure. And that bothers me. It also makes me think like one of the writers that I really got into like in my 20s. So I came to him kind of late, I guess you could say, like, because I had that in my reading history. It was Cordwainer Smith. And I find it funny that everyone was saying like the 70s that he used like a Chinese story structure. I don't understand why they were saying that. I still don't get it. I mean, I can see it's a different way the plot moves and everything else like that. But I don't know. It seemed like nobody actually explained why they were saying it was a Chinese story structure other than like he was a Chinese translator, so they just assumed that's where he picked it up from or something. But because of reading about that, reading people saying that, I actually dove into like this one book on Japanese folklore, Japanese novel structures, things like that. Same with like Chinese ones and things like that. And just like reading all these interesting different takes on how they build their stories and how they come to conclusions and stuff. One of my favorite ones, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but something like translated something like rapidly and very fast, where it starts off slow and about halfway through, it just all of a sudden picks up speed and goes downhill extremely fast, like after this twist, and it rushes towards the ending, and then it ends. And I just find that fascinating, all these different structures. Not that I use them consciously. I don't use them consciously. I kind of like intuitively structure, but you know.
Yeah, but the more you're exposed to, the more likely different and interesting structures will appear in your work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like the more you read it, the more you write it, and the more, because I think each of us has like this internal story. I guess it's like a muscle, like a story muscle for structure, and it's like everything else. Like when you do different muscles, it becomes more natural, more muscle memory, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and just like an analog to that is where I was reading something about running. And apparently it's better if we run on even ground rather than on a track, because apparently we evolved to run on even ground, and we've got muscles that are supposed to be worked out because the foot lands differently on different planes if you're running on uneven ground. But you don't work those muscles out if you're running on a flat surface, something like that. And I think that storytelling and the reading of stories, they're both intertwined. The stories you consume are the stories that you are going to influence the kind of stories you make. And I just want that, diversity of story when I'm reading, but also when I'm writing. I want to flow back and forth in time and in point of view if need be, as long as it can be interesting, as long as you can make it work. And what Paul said about this being the 3-act structure and the hero with 1,000 faces and the so-called monomyth and all of that, it's the same thing here in the UK. It's essentially infected everything. And then when you have conversations about the story, or when you get notes about the story, those are the ways in which the notes arrive. Like, well, there's a problem with your middle act, and well, are you using a 4-act structure or whatever? And I'm like, no, I don't want to know. I don't want to know about that. Is it compelling? Can you, does it stimulate emotion in you? Is it, do you have to think about it long after you've put it down? Those are the things that interest me. I'm not particularly interested in, well, this is where the story opens and this is the middle and this is the end and, this is the resolution of it. I'm like, no. Okay. What if my character doesn't change? Mm-hmm. What if my character doesn't learn anything and does not change? What if that's the situation? Because really, human beings, by and large, we tend not to change. We tend not to.
Right. That makes me think a lot about because we both write horror at some points,
Yes.
and I'm a little more into horror now than because I go back and forth through different phases and things like that. But I think horror allows for more experimentation with that sort of thing. Like horror readers actually are perfectly fine with a character who doesn't change. An inactive protagonist is so common in horror that it's part of the very bones of it. Like any other genre, you're like, well, this protagonist is inactive. They're not doing anything. They're not trying to change the story. But how many horror novels have we read or short stories where the protagonist just kind of caught up in all this and they're not able to that's the story, And I find that interesting because a lot of times when I realize I'm getting upset with some science fiction readers and writers who are saying, oh, the story has to be like this or it has to be like that. And then I realize, oh, I'm coming from this point of view of somebody who likes horror, and these things are perfectly okay with a horror novel, a horror short story, because it shakes things up, I guess you could say. That's like the point of it. You're supposed to be on slippery ground.
Yeah, but even science fiction doesn't have to be like that. This is how we get hidebound. And when you get hidebound, you don't. Innovation stops when you get hidebound, and if there's no innovation, people get tired of the stories. You'll have a narrow range of people who like it, and anything that doesn't conform to that, they just won't understand. They won't know where to slot it, and therefore they will bounce off it rather than exploring something that may become a rich experience for them.
Yeah, that's one thing I really worry about is the whole calcification of genre, especially with science fiction and especially with fantasy too. I mean, I was more worried about fantasy for a while, but then Grimdark kind of shook things up a little, but then it got into its own routines and, that sort of thing. And science fiction lately, like there seems to be some people who want it to go like a specific way and get upset when it doesn't follow that mold. And I worry about the calcification, especially with the big five. They seem to be very content with books as content, and I don't think that's good for us as readers.
No, it's not.
You've got me thinking, like, as someone who's a musician and spent a lot of their time thinking about music and classifications and music and that sort of a thing, it seems to me these days, like classification in music has almost completely broken down. I mean, you still got your jazz, you've still got your, oh, this is hard rock, right? But the lines have blurred so much compared to writing. Why do you think that is? Is that because of the big five and that kind of has almost ceased to exist in music or exists less? Or like, what are your feelings on that? Why are the lines not as blurred in the publishing world as they are in the music world?
Between genres and stuff.
Yes, between genres. Sorry.
I think that what has happened in music is that there have been so many crossover hits, so many unclassifiable people that have just, defied whatever boxes initial critics tried to put them in, that all of a sudden people are like, okay, you know what, maybe this doesn't matter. Let's just buy whatever we want. I also think that the digitalization of music helped in that you don't have to buy a whole album. You can just buy, because obviously I come from an era when vinyl to CDs to all of that. I even remember 8-tracks, you had to buy the album. All right. But you don't have to anymore. You can actually pick a track you want, listen to it, like it, and say, you know what, I can buy the EP if I want to or not. Things have kind of diffused a little bit in the sense that people can pick what they want, and people pick across genres more. Well, what we would have called genres, they pick across them more now. And what it does is that it's sort of, not a lot, but it sort of disempowers the gatekeepers from being tastemakers. So there's a difference between those two things. But, like the gatekeepers are still gatekeeping, but in terms of taste, they don't determine what people's tastes are anymore.
I wonder if the internet has something to do with that. Because like with the proliferation of all these voices and all these different people that are like, as much as I hate the term influencers, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not literally influencers, but like just normal people who can like reach out to a bunch of people and say, hey, this is something I really like. You guys should read it. And then more people read it. I'm seeing that right now actually on Blue Sky with Between Two Fires, which is a fantastic book. And it didn't get a lot of traction when it first came out a few years ago, but it seems to be slowly building up, like people just talking about it, like Kelly Link talked about it. I talked about it not too long ago, some other people. And it's wonderful to see that. And I'm wondering if that's part of it. Like, I don't know. I was going one way and I kind of lost my train of thought. Hold on.
No worries.
Well, I can pick up the baton for a minute and then you can come back.
Please do. Yes, please.
Because I think we were getting that when Twitter was Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
And then now that it's as if, everybody's been scattered to the wind and it's more fragmented now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the ability to build up a groundswell without a large publicity budget is limited now.
Mm-hmm.
At least I'm talking about in books now.
Yeah.
It's limited. So you need some kind of publicity budget, because otherwise you'd have to go to every social media platform, which is really exhausting.
Yes.
And probably not the most efficient use of your time.
No.
I think that there is a problem of us having not valued the paid critics. Definitely part of the problem is journalism, as in that paid journalism where we paid people to review books. We that is a bit of a problem because, for example, if you're not a darling of book talk, then it's a bit of a problem there, isn't it? If you're not, if book talk doesn't like you, then what? And if you've got a lot of people, and people, for the most part, people are doing this in their own time for no money. The people who are reviewing books, they're volunteers. They're doing it for little to no recompense. So like, even that is kind of it's scattered and scattering, but it's also narrowing because the dark horse book has difficulty getting traction in those kind of situations. Let's put it that way. You're not going to get that. Paul, you're about to come in again, so go.
Oh, no. I was going to say, yes, I agree. The dark horse, because like these places right now are popularity contests, like Book Talk and
yes.
And you gotta basically, if you're not extremely attractive and young, and and they tend to get very insular too. I noticed, especially with BookTube, because I was into looking at BookTube fantasy reviewers and stuff to see what they were into, and it's all Brandon Sanderson, and that's all they like. And one of them even said, "I don't like to read fantasy if it's not in that highly logical, technical kind of thing." And I'm like, well, why don't you read science fiction? Why are you reading fantasy? But it was just very odd, like looking at all that. And I was like, well, that's, I don't know if depressing is the word, but it's like, you need to appeal to that specific demographic now. And they're usually very young and attractive people. And it's just such a strange thing. Like, especially with the dragon, the romantasy being big, like at this right moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because of that one breakout book because of TikTok. And it was self-published, I think, if I remember right, originally, but isn't anymore. Now that's all publishers want. Like, I've been talking to some of my friends who like have books trying to get out on agents, and they're told things like, a little science fiction novel, no one's really going to care right now. Everyone wants romantasy. And I'm like, this is so surreal, but it's also like urban fantasy all over again from back during that time period,
Yeah. They don't actually, by they now, publishing, they actually don't know what's going to hit next.
Yeah.
So they only know what's hot now. Like, okay, give us more of what has already succeeded. They, I was talking to my agents about this and everything, and everybody, what I'm being told is nobody knows what's going to work. Nobody has the magic formula. So the only thing they can count on are things that have already worked. Try and get more of that until they can figure out the next big thing and then go with that. That's kind of what's going on. And one of the reasons I mentioned old, like traditional book critics, for example, is they would review things that are not in their taste, that are not to their taste. All right. And they're somehow able to look at things that they would not ordinarily read and find the merits in it and be able to put it in context of the other work that's out there and everything. Which is what we need of book critics.
It's useful. I like to turn back to some like old Clute reviews and things like that and read them over and stuff because they were interesting and intelligent. And even if you didn't like a book, you got a good picture of what the book was like. And then you'd think, oh, okay, I do like it though, because this sounds interesting and I'm going to go get it. And I think that's definitely something that's missing now. I don't know if it's better or worse than when everyone relied on Goodreads and Amazon reviews. Because now that seems to be less of a thing. Like, I'm sure publishers still kind of expect like high numbers of reviews on both of those to indicate a book is doing well.
It's been gamed though, hasn't it? That thing is, Goodreads and Amazon, they've been gamed.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if it's better or worse than that, because they both have their flaws. Yeah, but I agree. We need to return back to paid reviewers who could find those little, and they always go after like interesting books, and if something interesting and out of the wild speaks to them, they'll like sit there and just talk about it and try and get the word out too. Like those.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, like reviewing is actually writing. It's not, it is a genre of, in my opinion, sorry, let me not speak for everybody, but in my opinion, reviewing is writing. Right. And it requires the same kind of effort and time and experience, to get good at it, as you who are writing fiction, it's, reviewing is writing. They should put the same kind of effort into it,
I agree.
into writing it, into trying to understand the book in the terms in which it is meant to be understood. Just try to understand what the person was doing, whether the person is successful or not at doing it, but at least try to understand where it's coming from. Put it in context for the reader, saying, well, look, if you liked these kind of books, you'll like this book, that sort of thing. But it needs to be taken as writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a good review is fun to read on its own. It's entertaining on its own. You know what I mean? And I think most people don't get that. Like, I've heard people say, like, oh, editors are evil. Like, not editors, sorry, reviewers are evil. We shouldn't have reviews anymore. I don't like when this person gave me a negative review, that sort of thing. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I still have a Locus subscription, because they still have paid reviews and they're still interesting. They're still very well written.
Yes.
And usually when I'm online and I say, oh, this person had a bad review of my book, I don't mean they reviewed my book negatively. I mean, sure, I want every review to be glowing and positive and think I'm amazing. But what I mean is, like, it's a badly written review. Like, it's not a good review in that sense. And I don't know why, but I find that more offensive than a negative review of my work.
Maybe you feel like they haven't made an effort. Maybe you feel they haven't made an effort.
It's insulting.
And if your book is worth the time, they will make the effort for it.
Exactly. Yeah. That's good. It's insulting.
Yeah. Boy. Okay. This is one of these moments we talked about where I've got like 40 thoughts going on at the same time, and I'm trying to say them all. So I do review some books. I review books for the podcast, right? And I will make like a very short, what I call an audio column out of it, right? And I usually try to do like 3 or 4, maybe 5 at the same time, and I try to keep it under like 10 minutes. So I do very short ones, and I do not do a whole lot of analysis or anything, but I do try to say, hey, like, if you like X, Y, and Z, then you will like this book. This book is for you. You know what I mean? I don't try to be like, well, this book is terrible, I hate their writing, or, that sort of a thing. I try to narrow in on what they're doing and say, here's a very quick summary. Here are the things that they're really hitting on. If you like these things, then you will like this book, and then move on to the next thing, because I don't think anyone wants to listen to a super in-depth book review in audio. You know what I mean?
Oh, I might.
And if I really
actually, I like book
Tade.
reviews. I like listening to book reviews. It's usually interesting to me.
Oh, well, maybe I'll have to think about that.
I do agree with that. Actually, I like book reviews a lot. I find them entertaining on their own. I've actually got, and not just book reviews, movie reviews too. I've got a lot of Ebert's collected books or collected reviews.
Yes, I'm looking at them right now, actually.
Oh, there's one. It's so good. When he goes to watch a movie, the movie's so terrible, he leaves and goes to a restaurant and then reviews the pianist there. Instead.
Wow.
And that, I think he ended up being Harry Chapin Jr., something like somebody that became big after he did that.
Wow.
No, reviews are important. Reviews are writing, and they should never be done carelessly, because whatever it is you're reviewing, somebody has devoted hours of their life to writing.
Absolutely.
Which, at least, even if the book or story is terrible, there's something there to put that number of words together. There's got to be something there. There's some heart in there somewhere. There is something you can find.
Yeah.
Yes. And if I feel like, wow, I can't even with this book, I just don't review it. You know what I mean? I just set it aside, said, okay, that was that. Moving on to the next thing.
Well, exactly.
So question, this brings up something that I've heard a lot of people talking about, and you're all talking about like what's happening in publishing thematically, like romantasy and all of that sort of a thing. And you're both traditionally published authors. Sometimes we have indie authors come on here, self-published authors, and that sort of a thing. Would either of you ever consider going indie or hybrid? I think maybe by indie here, I'm referring to self-publishing.
Absolutely. I don't actually discriminate at all between types of publishing. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I do know, for example, that I like to write. I don't want to be involved in a lot of the other stuff, the marketing, apart from, say, interviews, and I will do the publicity stuff that the writer needs to do, but I don't want to be in charge of the marketing of the thing. I don't want to do the businessy parts of it. So I would, for example, hire someone to do those things. So if I were to say self-publish a book, I would actually hire someone, say, okay, you're a publicist, do this. I would go to one of the models where you pay them and they do all the stuff for you. But I do not distinguish between types of publishing. To me, they are all valid. To me, you personally, they're all valid. And I would, if I wrote something, and let's be honest, this is likely to happen. But if I wrote something that was completely unmainstream, so far from the mainstream that no publisher would want to publish it, I would publish it myself if I had to. Because, look, to write a book, I have to believe in it. And if I believe in a book, I will get it out there one way or the other. And at the extreme end of it, if I think it is just so wild that nobody is going to buy this, then I will release it for free, But I don't distinguish. I'll get my story out there one way or the other.
Yeah, I actually agree. I don't distinguish between any of that. I've thought about it from time to time, but then I think about all the promotion and everything else that you need to do, and I just go, ugh. Especially these days, because there's so much junk on like places like Amazon, that sort of thing. Especially with the advent of AI books being churned out constantly, that there's like no way to be heard. And I think too, a lot of the people who are in Kindle Direct Publishing, that kind of thing too, they seem to be much more focused on trying to make money and make a living out of it than I'd care to admit to myself. You know what I mean? They're more focused on chasing whatever the hot genre is in their little self-publishing sphere, that sort of thing. They're going for more safe and less experimental and stuff, which I find so strange because, like, for me, indie and doing things yourself, you should push the boundary. Maybe it's just those are the ones I'm hearing about. And those are the ones that are getting a lot of attention, are the safe ones. But I want weird. I want strange. I want just completely off the wall. And right now where I get that is from the small press, thankfully. That's one thing I love about it. But like, so I've thought about it, but I thought, well, I think it would get lost amongst that. So at the most, I'm just going to try and keep trying to push it out there. Even if it's completely cuckoo banana strange, I just keep doing it and see what happens. That's the only way I know how to do it, and I'm just lucky enough that no one has looked at my stuff and gone, what the hell is your problem? Cause that's my fear. And like, I still have that fear now, like, cause the people who like Glass House, I'm like, okay, well, that's a little, I don't see it as being traditional horror, but some people do. So cool. But I worry like, well, what's going to happen when they pick up Open Your Eyes or something like, or Glass Clopping Girls and be like, wait, what? Yeah. So I try not to worry about that sort of thing because I do what I do, and yeah, if worst comes to worst, I would self-publish. I've actually tempted to do at some point in time, like print only, self-publish some book that would only exist in 500 copies. I'd give out mostly to friends and family and not sell any. Just to.
I have thought of that. I've thought of that too. I have thought of it. It would be in a format that I want, a prestige format. Yeah. It's not going to be too long. It'll be a hardcover, probably small book with like 300 pages or something like that.
Yeah.
But it would really look, it will look the way I want it to look. It will feel like the texture of the paper will be the exact paper I want. I will specify everything, and I will literally just 500 copies to particular readers. I'll just give it to them because I just want this book because I want it to exist.
Yeah, not sell it or anything, and just have it exist because and have it be in this format that's, I guess you could say, like, it will cease to exist after a certain point. Books eventually rot, decay, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So like, it's not immortal on the internet, although even the internet now, we've learned that it's far more ephemeral than like actual physical copies. But the fact that it's limited, only so many people get to see it. It just makes it special, especially these days and age. And yeah, I'd want like a very nice hardcover, maybe gilded edges, that kind of thing. Like go all out, get illustrations paid for that. It wouldn't be a cheap enterprise.
No,
but that's not. It's not the point.
I even already know, for example, there's a Michael Sisko book called Animal Money, right? I like the text. I like how the text on that is done. All right. I would want the text in that. Then the hardcover edition of Sandman Endless Nights.
Oh,
right. It has end papers. It has end papers of a texture that I really love. So I would combine those two things for, like, I already know the bits and pieces that I want to add to this book. I've really thought about it.
I love this.
One thing I was actually looking at, I don't know if you guys read Dave Eggers at all.
Yes,
but
I do.
I have.
Okay, so you've seen his hardcovers for Hologram for the King and When We Are Hungry, right?
I think we have a different edition down here, but yeah.
Okay. The hardcovers here, well, I ordered directly from McSweeney's, so I think that was different than the one that was published through like Random House and stuff. It's really nice. The thing is, I got it and I'm like, wow, this is a wonderful Hologram for the King, especially. It's like imprinted gold, like hardcovers, like leathery kind of feel, but like an interesting texture. It's all embossed and it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
But the book doesn't feel like it matches the content.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the story is good. I like it, but it feels like the cover and everything else, it feels like a fantasy novel, like the layout and everything like that, or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels like the container should hold something different. So I was like, I want to do something similar to that, but have it be, and it would be like something, an experimental approach to like an idea of an epic fantasy.
Yeah.
But written more like Dunsany. You know how his short stories are written? They're like epic novels in short story form. Something like that. I love his, what is it? It's kind of like a distance third person. I like to call it the epic voice. And I know that's kind of out of fashion these days, but to write like a bunch of series of like shorts, like flashes like that, contained in something like that, maybe some poetry, some illustrations, and just give it to friends and family and readers.
But that's good though. You see, because your voice will stand out from all the other voices, from the cacophony out there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, I don't know if have you ever read, and these are comics now, but have you ever read the work of by Chris Ware?
Yes, I have.
No.
You know, so
yes, Chris Ware is great.
Innovative ways of presenting stories. Those are the kind of things that are, that have been on my mind a lot recently. Like I don't want to tell stories in the same way or format them in the same way. What was the name of that guy who had this kind of boxed novel where you determine the arrangement of the chapters? What's his name?
Yes. I know who you're talking about.
Anyway, it'll come back to me. It'll come back to me. All right. But, a novel you can read in any order. You determine the order in which you want to read it.
This isn't that book. I know the book you're talking about, and I've always wanted to read it because it's so cool. Hopscotch.
Yes.
I know I'm mispronouncing the last name wrong there, but it's very interesting because it's written in a similar way where you can kind of just read like in any order. And he's got like at the beginning of the book, he actually says like, here are different ways you can read this, but you can pick your own. And one idea I had for a book, there'd be a map at the beginning. And the map would have page numbers for rooms. And then you could go through the map and then create the story based on that. And it would be like people wandering in a labyrinth, similar to Piranesi.
That's cool.
Yeah. But I mean, Piranesi, that has its own problems, but that's, a lot of people love that book, so I'm not going to go into that. But like, you know what I mean? Like,
I kind of bounced off it myself.
Yeah. But I think like that would be interesting, like to have these, like the story be built out of the reader wandering through the labyrinth on the page itself,
Yeah.
And how cheap for each one.
Well, since we're in a horror space, can I just mention a horror one? I don't know if you must have heard of this. We All Hear Stories in the Dark by Robert Sherman.
Actually, I have not read that, and now I'm going to for sure.
Okay, it's got 3 volumes. Okay, the order in which you read it is your own. You determine that, but it is a fantastic read.
Oh, I'm excited.
All right, it's a fantastic read. There are 3 volumes. Just buy the 3. Buy all the 3 volumes because you may find yourself having to jump from volume 1 to volume 3 and back, and you determine how you read it.
Interesting.
Okay, then definitely I'll get all 3.
The other one I'd like to recommend, which is not, it's actually more of a graphic novel, but it's actually not a traditional graphic novel, and it's not horror, but it's called Hair by Richard Maguire. And the entire story is set in one room, but in different time frames. So you could start in 1959, but on the same page, you'll find out what's happening in the same room in 1955 or 1979. And it goes all the way to 2000 and something or the other. And it jumps back and forth like that, but always in the same space. In fact, it goes to the past before the house gets built in some of the pages.
That's cool.
So there's so much that goes on there. And then the book that I was talking about is actually called Composition Number 1. And it was by Mark Saporta, and that's the one where it comes in a box and you can swap the chapters around in any order you like.
Yeah.
Have you all heard of Aaron Nothing Press?
Yes.
They did one kind of an anthology about a character called the Librarian, right? And the sequel to that anthology was published on library cards, basically.
Oh, that's cool. I actually tried to get in that.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I sent him a short story about the librarian, and they almost took it, but I guess it was some parts of it was too similar to another story, which is fine, One of those things where you accidentally like kind of cross over somehow. But
yeah,
I remember a few years ago, around the time I don't remember what they re-released Vladimir Nabokov's Pale Fire as a collection of index cards, and I wanted to get that so badly. That was really cool. Like, it was just a bunch of index cards.
It was limited edition though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was limited edition. I can't find it anymore. I was like, why did I not buy this when I saw this at the bookstore?
Yeah.
That was like a while. Actually,
sometimes it's not the right time.
No. But actually, now that I think about it, actually, it was more than a few years ago. It might have been 10 years ago. My age, time just goes by.
It sure does, doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm like, oh, that was like a few years ago. Oh, no, wait, that was 10 years ago.
So, like, to bring it back just a little bit, what do you guys see for the future of publishing? Like, are people just going to start being hybrid authors? Like, is that just like the future of the profession, or what do you think?
I think that's the present right now, actually.
Yes, it's already the present.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I have friends who are traditionally published, but they also follow a hybrid model, and then they do other things. I don't want to say nobody, but a lot of my friends are doing more than one thing. Mm-hmm. So some of them, they're writing novels, but they're also writing comics. Some of them are writing comics and they're also doing games. Some of them are doing short story collections and they're doing, web comics or whatever other kind of narrative forms they're following. I'm doing screenplays and books at the same time, for example. Like, people already doing they're already having multiple streams, which really is the wise thing to do in this day and age, because like we mentioned before, everything is fragmented. So you want to make sure that you've got your fingers in at least two pies.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to only have your finger in one pie, because that could implode at any moment.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I experienced that with the video game thing, because I had my finger in that pie. And then when Twitter died, sales plummeted.
Yes.
And from the other indie game other indie game creators I was talking to, the same thing happened to them. It like happened across the board, like all of a sudden, because I guess players were like going and talking about indie games on Twitter, and that's how they would catch by word of mouth and that sort of thing. So you didn't even have to really promote. These people would be promoting for you. And when Twitter kind of did what it did, like Musk making it impossible to, if you're like a normal person, to actually get hurt anymore, it just, that whole thing. Like, I went from, with Bad Writer, I was earning like, I think I was selling about 1,000 a week, and it dropped like to nothing practically overnight. My follow-up games didn't sell as much as that, but we're still selling really well. And just all of a sudden, just overnight, they just went down, just plummeted, just out of like around a few months after he took over. So yeah, it is very good to have your hands in many different things, because you never know what's going to go kablooey.
Interesting.
But books will still live.
Actually, go ahead, Tade.
No, I was going to say books will still live, because, books will still exist. How they get from writer to buyer is a completely different matter. But people will innovate. People will think, something will happen, because this is the thing. Usually you're going to have some kind of black swan event, something that will change the paradigm completely, that was not anticipated before. It will happen, because the tendency is for that sort of thing to happen. If you look at history, if you look at time, the tendency is for something to happen to change publishing and to change how we look at things and how we get things. So something is going to happen. The point is, like, in the interim, we need to kind of all be spiders and have 8 hands and be looking for opportunities but also in some way, part of the problem is to find a way to remain innovative, which is kind of tricky when the tendency is to try and get what was there before. Pattern buying, algorithm-based marketing doesn't favor people who are trying to do a new thing. Right. That's part of the problem, but we will prevail. We will persist, and we'll get there.
I think so. I think there is like starting like to be a huge blowback against AI and algorithms and things like that. Selecting things for people, curating things for people, as well as being used in different things. So I'm hoping that can lead to a sea change of sorts.
Right.
But I'm also very optimistic that, weird shit sometimes takes off. You know what I mean? There's always a point where like there's something that nobody expected to do well at all, just completely blows up and goes insane. Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation, for example. I think that surprised everybody, wonderfully so. I think that was just great that it happened, and I think that just happens. Like it happens in film and in books, and I'm waiting for it to happen again because that'll be fun. I just get excited when it happens because part of me is like, oh, I'm hoping that maybe something of mine can at least reach a certain level of stratosphere, but also just seeing like something like, okay, I recognize myself in that, that weird ultra like thing, I'm like, there's a kinship, a familiar spirit. And I think that's wonderful.
Interesting.
I agree. And just speaking of Annihilation, I really think that needs to be adapted again.
I think so.
Well, yeah, because, Garland didn't actually read the entire trilogy before adapting it.
Right.
So I don't think he was mindful of where the story was going or was meant to go. I think that's where the problem, well, at least that was my problem with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My problem with it was I actually thought the second book was better than Annihilation. And I would love to see that adapted, or maybe even a TV series.
They're different books. I like them both. They're different books. They have different vibes, but I just love that entire trilogy. I've actually bought it for more people than I care to confess.
I don't want to say how many copies I have of it.
I have two. I have 2 copies. I have 3 copies of Authority because I got the kind of signed copy of Authority that Jeff Vandermeer used when the proof copy that he was using to make the proof changes. So I have that. But then I've got the Omnibus, Area X Omnibus, the hardcover, really beautiful edition.
I got that too.
Yeah, and then I have the paperbacks. Sorry, we're talking about other people's books, but we love books. What can we say?
No worries.
I think more people should go on and like talk about other people's books. I was on a podcast when Silence That Binds came out, and I actually started talking about Fabio Fernandez, and the interviewer was just like, I've never had somebody come on here and mention other people's work before. What? You're really a good guy. And I'm like,
so Fabio, by the way, just shout out, really great guy and really great writer. Just saying.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. We did a few years ago. Me and him did a joint book launch, and it was so much fun. And I'd like to do that again with him time, but he's really just a fantastic writer. I published him when I did magazines for a little while there when I was doing Grendel Song and that sort of thing, like ages ago. And that's how we met. And I've just been a fan of his work ever since.
That's great. Well, because we're actually almost coming up on time already, believe it or not.
Wow.
However, I know you guys are both huge movie fans, or maybe I should just say film, right?
And we're not snobbish. We'll take anything.
Yeah. But I'm not. So why don't you all just tell me some movies that are just like really fantastic movies that I should watch?
Oh, wow. But it depends on what you like, though, because, there's such a range of movies and films to pick from, but it really depends a lot on the kind of movies you as an individual would like. I mean, for example, I would, if I talk about something like Black Phone, if we're in the horror space, It Follows, I don't know what you like, or even that French film Raw. I don't know if you've heard of or seen it.
No, not at all.
Real quick, Black Phone is so interesting.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I find it real funny too, because the same guy who adapted the screenplay of the short story and who also directed and wrote Sinister.
Yeah.
And they have similar actors and stuff playing different roles. And I just find that funny that there's a conversation between the two movies, as well as completely how it turns inside and out where you think it's going to go. Have you ever read the George Sanders short story, Victory Lap?
Yes, I have.
It is similar stuff, but in a different way completely. Like
Yeah.
you get the same like basic setup, but they both go in completely different directions. You don't expect either of them to go. And I
Didn't they
love it.
adapt that too? George Sanders' story. They adapted it, didn't they?
They did. I didn't know that. Oh, I've got to find that now.
I think they did, and yeah, I think they did. That's
okay.
That was certainly a thing that I think happened. Yeah.
That actually the way he wrote that the third person voice that he used in that, the stream of conscious third person, is what I tried to imitate with Glass House because I loved it so much. Like the way he did that.
All right.
And I was just like, I want to do something similar like that, which was not easy, but I just felt inspired, like, cause it just was just so well done. Like I'd never actually experienced being in character's head as well as he did with that short story. Like, cause the closest I had to it before were like works by James Joyce and Virginia Woolf, but I think he does it better than they do. Like in that short story, like he just does it so well.
Can I suggest the short stories of Lydia Davis if you're looking for that?
I love Lydia Davis. She's
so okay. But we see we're back into books and we're supposed to be talking about film.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm over here taking notes. Talk away.
Okay, well, real quick, going back to the film thing, I'm going to dodge your original question because there's a lot of films I could list that could go on forever. Instead, I'd like to talk about films I'm excited that have come out that I haven't seen yet.
Right.
Because like a lot of people complain about there being too many reboots, requels, blah 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 blah. Which that's fair and understandable because it is very much a franchise industry now. But at the same time, I'm so excited about movies like Poor Things. That one just looks so interesting and cool and fun. Love Lies Bleeding. That looks really good too. Like those two, I'm just super excited to watch. There's another one I'm trying to remember the name of. It's like escaping me at the moment. And I'm excited because they're just such different, interesting movies and takes on things. And they're not part of a franchise. They're not part of a reboot. They're just standalone, really cool things.
Yeah, just new stuff.
Yeah, really new stuff.
What about stuff that's not horror? Paul's like,
Okay, so I'll put it to you this way. So I saw Killers of the Flower Moon, right? And it's really good. Like I know people get exhausted because it's really long, but I really enjoyed it, especially if you consider film to be something that is going to immerse you in the situation and in the emotion of a situation. Killers of the Flower Moon is really excellent.
Okay.
I need to see that still. I've been wanting to for a while. Actually, one of the ones I wanted to see in the theaters. I think it's still in the theaters around here. I'm hoping because it just feels like that movie that you need that kind of level of immersion that a theater gives you. That you don't really quite get at home.
Yeah,
like a home. Like I got a projector at home as well as some surround sound stuff too. But it's not the same as like having that giant screen. And like the immersion is just. It's amazing because like when you leave a good movie like that, you feel like you've been somewhere else, like you lose time almost. You feel like you're walking through a portal back into reality. Like the same feeling I get when I finish a really good book,
Yeah.
And I think that's what, what's his name was saying when he said that, these movies, like the Marvel movies aren't film. They're not cinema. They're something else.
Like I think he said, they're theme parks or something.
Scorsese at the theme park. And he's right. He's absolutely right.
Yeah, and people came back around to agree with him because when he said it, people were still in the afterglow of Avengers Endgame, I think. I can't, time is collapsing for me around around COVID, but I think that he said it around when the afterglow of Endgame was still there. And people had experienced that big emotion of Captain America picking up Mjolnir. Where and you would have seen cinemas where it was recorded, the reaction of the audience was recorded, and people really felt that moment and all of that. And I think that when he said that, I think people felt invalidated. They felt like their emotions that they felt in a Marvel movie, they felt that he was invalidating those emotions. And I don't think that's what he was doing. But hey, I'm not him. I don't know what he was trying to do. But I think people got a valid emotional reaction to that moment in Endgame. I think it was, if I may slightly disagree with someone of Martin Scorsese's stature, I think that was cinema. If cinema is meant to stimulate emotional response in the audience. It did happen. That did happen.
That's true.
And that you can't negate that because it happened.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. I wonder if it's not like, I mean, he was taking the Marvel and superhero movies and all that phenomenon now as a whole.
Yeah.
While they're like piecemeal, there are films and spots like that where you've had those emotions. And I mean, it's a complicated thing, but I mean, there is a lot of movies and TV shows now that are trying to follow the Marvel formula, and they're not really quite hitting cinema. You know what I mean? They're not quite,
yeah.
or the immersion. Cause I mean, yeah, I think that's what he was criticizing.
Have you guys seen, speaking of superhero movies and shows, Tade, I think I heard of this show from you, Doom Patrol. Have you guys seen Doom Patrol?
I have. Well, okay. I have to qualify that. I've seen season 1.
Okay, I just finished watching season 1.
I've seen season 1.
Okay. Is it a lot like the Grant Morrison comics? Because I love those.
I don't know.
I feel very so I have to be very tentative when I'm talking about this. So I'm a big fan of the Grant Morrison Doom Patrol. Very big fan of it. Okay.
Yeah.
And there are some elements from the Grant Morrison story, run, but I would say it's its own thing.
Oh, okay.
To me, people, okay, let's put it this way, because we have to do it in the way that, we can't have been talking about how critics should behave and not behave like that ourselves. People like it, right? Yeah. You know what? I'm not a hypocrite. I'm going to own my biases. People like it, and it is okay. And if you are, how do I put it? If you are someone who has not been exposed to that kind of superhero narrative, then yes, you're going to find it extremely weird. To those of us who are steeped in it, it's not nearly weird enough because, yeah, it's, but if you're coming from having seen, say, Avengers or even X-Men, you're going to find the Doom Patrol very strange. So people find it strange enough. And I think that this is to the credit of the people who wrote and directed and produced the show. They've found a kind of level of weirdness that would be okay for the mainstream. And therefore it works. I think they're on season 4. I think season 4 is their last season, I think.
Yes.
I think because Brendan Fraser has been in it from the beginning. And I think that Brendan Fraser's profile has changed since the beginning of Doom Patrol, since the first season.
Right.
Since the whale, yeah, his profile has changed completely. So I did not really expect him to want to continue Doom Patrol after the whale, after the acclaim that he got from the whale. But it's good. What can I say? It's good. It isn't bad. I'm a bit sore because I want to see something of the level of weirdness that, I've seen in the comics. And that's not going to happen because it doesn't have broad enough appeal. Yeah. They're not going to produce a show like the Doom Patrol.
That's true. I mean, they tried with Legion, and I don't think that worked very well for them.
No, Legion didn't work for them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was great, but yeah, that's good to know though. So when I go in, I can watch it now and adjust my expectations.
Yes. It's just not weird enough, but it's good. It's good as if you didn't come with the expectations of, say, the Morrison run,
okay,
or Rachel Pollock's run.
Yeah. I can always reread the comics. So I'm going to go to it as a different, I know I wanted the Morrison run comics, but I'm just going to go to it as its own thing.
Okay. So. Paul, here's my take. So I'm not a comic book geek. I had many friends that were, but I just never fell into that category. But, I've read some comic books here and there. I'm familiar with general comic book stuff, right? But I had never read Doom Patrol before. And I came into it and I was like, I really enjoyed it. It was pretty awesome. And it's really weird. And I've read some weird stuff, you know what I mean? But not comic book weird. And I know comic books can get really out there.
Especially that time period, like with Grant Morrison's writing.
Yeah.
The Invisibles, Flex Mentallo.
Sears House on Sears Earth. I actually just took that up from the library again recently because I wanted to reread it to get ideas for something I'm going to work on after I'm done with Cancer Eats the Heart, which I'm working on now. Because I just love a lot of the stuff he does with that. And the structure is interesting too.
Yes.
It's basically like an unraveling of story because Batman's unraveling
I don't
Mine.
think anybody had written a Batman story from the perspective of Arkham himself or used Arkham as a character the way he did. Arkham, the Asylum as a character itself,
Interesting.
Because I think they always skirted around the fact that it was a Lovecraft reference.
Yes.
But Grant Morrison just kind of leapt right and said, okay, we're just going to go in. This is what I'm doing. And I just love how he does. And just his take on Two-Face and everything else is just so interesting. So I'm like, obviously I'm not going to do a Batman story, but I like that idea and the idea of a single location because I like doing that with Glass House.
Mm-hmm.
So I might return to that sort of thing. I'm messing around with this idea of kind of like a Gothic on Mars, like after a first Martian colony kind of a thing. I picture these teenagers doing a seance on Mars, and I don't know where it's going to go from there, but I know it's going to be something like that, like fractured, unwinding.
Interesting.
Because I'm a nerd.
All good. It actually kind of reminds me of our conversation about Rust Belt Gothic and some of your reading part of your short story book. I would definitely call some of your stories Rust Belt Gothic for sure. But I don't want to get too involved in that because we're running out of time. I do have one question I have to ask Tade before we go, though. I just feel like I would not be a good Tade Thompson fan if I didn't ask this question. What's the news on Molly Southbourne for Netflix? What's going on?
Molly Southbourne, I think, so this is a very difficult question to answer because I don't know what I'm allowed to say and allowed not to say. It's still in the works. We have 3 scripts and an outline. I can't tell you anything else. I don't think it's, this is the problem. Like the problem with a lot of screen work is that, the disadvantage of it is that most of the things that you do will not get made or have a very long lag time, and you can't talk about them until they say you can now talk about this. The good part of it is that they pay you no matter what, but the bad part is that you do a lot of work that you cannot talk about. So all I can tell you is it's still in the running. That's about literally all I can say. I can't say anymore. I can say that I'm happy with the scripts. I can tell you that.
So are you working on the scripts with some other people or are you doing it mostly yourself?
I'm not writing the scripts for Molly Southbourne. I'm more of an EP role than anything else. But I am happy with the scripts. Very happy with them. They are faithful enough and departed enough to be new things at the same time. So it's very good. It's very brutal. I like it.
Brutal is good. Yeah. That's one thing I loved about the novellas is just how brutal they are.
Yeah. I mean,
oh yes.
I mean, there's gonna be blood, when.
Yeah. Has to be. No, that's awesome. That's great. Thanks. I'm excited that you are happy with the scripts. That means a lot to me. I mean, if the author can be happy with the scripts, then, I think we can all feel safe about it.
Yeah, as news is available, when I can talk about it, I will. I just can't. These things have a really long lag time. In fact, what we talked about before, where like some TV shows are trying to copy the Marvel method, it's probably because of lag time. Those decisions were probably made like 2 years ago before they started coming onto TV, and that's why it seems like that. And you'll probably see a little bit more of that before people start to course correct.
Right. No, that's great news. I know when they announced Martha Wells' Murderbot was going to be made into a show, a lot of people were like, uh-oh. Like, are we going to love this or hate this?
Yeah, but, Murderbot deserves a shot anyway.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah, I want to see more stuff like that being made into shows and things like that. Even if they get it wrong, we can always say, complain about and say we need a different version of Annihilation.
Yeah, right?
Look, they can try to, it's like Solaris. Tarkovsky is Tarkovsky. Soderbergh took a shot. All right.
I like Soderbergh.
Yeah.
Not as much as Tarkovsky, obviously, but it's good.
Yeah. It's good on its own and everything. And then in some years' time, someone else will take another shot.
Yeah.
It's the iterative nature of creativity. It will be back.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Okay, guys, last question. And Paul, you just answered this a couple months ago, so I'm going to let you skip this question. But Tade, you have to answer this question. What is bringing you hope right now?
Literally everything. So how do I not put in Eris into all of this? Okay, so people look at chaos as if it's a bad thing. It's not. Everything seems chaotic and disorganized, but chaos often precedes creation. the world is in a cycle of chaos, right? And everything seems to be off its axis, wars, rumors of wars and all that nonsense. But this will happen. Things go that way, but they go the other way too. The fact that it's chaotic means that there is some kind of peace on some kind of horizon somewhere. The duration between now and that horizon, I don't know, but it does mean that things are going to settle down. So we need to consider the chaos as actually something that shows us hope, because stability, chaos, order and chaos tend to swap with each other. So if you have the chaos now, then order is coming. So that kind of gives me hope in a way. But more specifically, I'm given hope by the fact that there are a ton of people who are writing really good fiction right now. They may get lost in the noise, but they're doing it. People are not, somehow with everything that's going on, it's not stopping people from being creative. And that's a good thing.
It's a fantastic time to be a reader.
Yeah.
Oh God, yes. Yes, absolutely. For those of us who don't read super fast, it's a little bit overwhelming. It's like, what do it's funny, right before the podcast, I'm cleaning my office and I'm looking at my bookshelves like, I need to make more space. What do I get rid of? How do I even decide what to get rid of? I don't know.
But you don't have to get rid of anything. And you don't have to keep up with everything either. You just read at your own pace and enjoy everything you have.
Well, that's true. Well,
yeah, that's the thing. I like to buy books and I'm like, I know people are like, no, I'm not going to allowed to buy any more books until I read the ones I already have, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, because there's going to be some time in the future where I'm bored and I've got nothing to do. And I'm going to pick up a book and be like, oh, I haven't read this yet. I bought this like 2 years ago. I'm going to read it now. It's like a gift to future bored me.
Yeah. Well, I agree with the keeping up part, but Tade, I'm going to put you on the phone with my wife so you can discuss the space in our house with her and why more of it needs to be books.
Yes. Look, I'm in a room right now that is full of books and they keep multiplying. And the more they multiply, the happier I get. So I'm like, yeah, please join me in books. I don't mind at all.
I love it.
When I was a kid, I always wanted my own library. So I'm beyond happy with my way of life right now. Sure, 90% of my house has bookshelves in it, but that's fine. Well, more of my apartment. But it's wonderful.
Love it. I love it. All right, guys. Future projects. What do you all have coming up?
Okay. So I'm back in that space that I can't talk about. But okay, how do I put this? I'm writing. Okay, so oh God, I can't talk about. Okay, I'm writing a novel right now that is probably going to take, it's not upcoming because it's probably going to take me the rest of the year to actually finish it, both the first draft and and revisions and all of that, which is more I can't talk about it, but I've got a book that I'm writing that will come up. I've got a short story that will probably come up that I also can't talk about it. All right. Let me put it this way. Okay. I've got a book that I'm working on. So people who are expecting a book from me probably expect some kind of announcement in the middle of the year about that. I've got a few short stories in the pipeline that are going to be talked about as soon as they've got all the signatures, whatever. I've got a TV show that I am working on that I can probably say is science fiction, and it's like my dream project.
Amazing.
But I can't talk about it. But whenever I can talk about it, I will be like gushing, like it will be like Niagara Falls. I'll be like, yes, this is what I've been trying to talk about, but couldn't. All right. So that is coming up as well. And I've got some crime stuff coming up as well that I also can't talk about. So I'm sorry that I'm not specific. And even there's a novella that will probably be announced in the next few weeks. I'm not allowed to talk about it just yet because of the publishers, but it's more, I think I'll be on safe ground saying it's a tribute. It's more like a tribute to a friend of mine who died last year, and all the profits are going to go to that friend's family. to his wife and daughters. So
Wow, that's amazing.
that will come out sometime in sometime in January, sometime in the next few weeks. The announcement should be in the next few weeks and all that. So those are the things that I'm working on. Sorry that it's so non-specific, but I can't say any more than that. Oh, okay, no. So God. The last novella that I had is a book called Jackdaw, which was in hardcover. The paperback is coming out. The paperback is coming out soon. I can say that. So Jackdaw paperback,
That's a good book.
coming out soon. I can say that.
I really enjoyed it.
I am glad to hear that because I've been trying to find a copy of it and it is like sold out everywhere. I cannot get it unless I go to Amazon, which
I will send you. I will send you one if you give me. I will send you one. Email me a postal address. I'll send you one.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
No problem. No problem.
Paul, what do you got coming up?
All right. So as I said before, in March, that's going to be the release of Skinless Man Counts to Five and Other Tales of the Macabre.
Which is excellent.
Yeah, it's my short story collection that's coming out. It's one of those things where like I kept thinking for the longest time, like, oh, I shouldn't try and get a short story collection out. I don't have enough. And then I went over and I'm like, oh my God, I've got so many short stories that have been published. Narrowing down just the ones I like, I still have a lot. Narrowing those down to just like, because we wanted to do a horror collection, just the ones that are horror. Well, I guess you could say horror adjacent. Not all of them. There's a lot of ones that are sci-fi horror. There's fantasy horror. You know what I mean? There's not, it leaps between genres, but most of them are like scary and disturbing at some point. So I'm really excited about that. And we named it after the one story I got in Apex, I think 2022. That was also Stoker recommended reading for that year, which was kind of cool. And I just love the title. So I'm like, cool, I'm going to just slap this on a book, It's got to be used as that too. And then in October this year, I have Cancer Eats the Heart coming out, also from Underland Books. And I've been working on that one for quite a while. I'm in edits right now. And it's going really well. So basically the story for that one is there's this one girl named Angelique Blackthorne who was raised to believe that she was an antichrist by like a coven of Satanists. And she is currently being hunted by a cult of ritualistic serial killers who are trying to hasten about the end of the world. And she's gathering up all these other friends of hers to make a new coven because her original one was completely destroyed. And also trying to figure out whether or not she really is the Antichrist or if there's something else going on. There's a lot of ambiguity at play, which I find fun. It's not a religious book, though. I mean, a lot of people look at horror that has to do with like the devil and Satanism and like demon possession and all that sort of stuff. This one doesn't, it's not a possession story. They usually make them into like religious horror and Catholic horror, mostly leaning that way. But one thing about Rosemary's Baby was that wasn't there at all. There was no like.
You want to hear something else? The poster child for all of that wasn't meant to be religious either. The book, Blatty's book, The Exorcist, it wasn't like that. The movie is the movie that made it more supernatural and more religious. The book is actually a lot more ambiguous.
Yeah. So the ambiguity in this is less about the ambiguity of the supernatural, more about the ambiguity of what's actually happening. So supernatural stuff does happen, but what is attributing to it is ambiguous and might be more cosmic horror, might not be, but it's never actually explained the reason why. So it's more definitely weird fiction in that aspect, because weird fiction is more about the uncanny and unexplained. And I guess you could say supernaturally it's also ambiguous because it's told with a first person narrator and, well, sort of first person, more like first person plural, and you can't trust it at all because it's obvious that they're indoctrinated to a cult, and whether or not the things that they experienced actually were things that they experienced or that they thought they experienced is a completely different story.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's a very, the first person plural was not originally done on purpose. It was so funny because I sold the book on pitch to Underland, and then I was trying to get into it, and I couldn't get into it. You know what I mean? You know, there's sometimes you need that thing to get it going. And then I realized, wait, instead of just introducing the character of Angelique Blackthorne and making it from her perspective or anything like that, what if we have this group of people talking about her?
Yeah.
Like gossip. And I did that, and that was written in an interesting way. It was like written without quotes, written without like actually attributing who said, she said what, this. It's just their conversation. And then when that was over and I moved to the next chapter, it just felt completely natural just to launch right into first person plural. We did this, we did that, we did. And it's like on that aspect, it's also about like how like you lose yourself when you like in a group of people, and like there's something to be had in that. There's actually like being lost in that kind of way. There's like companionship and that sort of thing, being part of a group. And there's something nice about that, but it's also dangerous because you lose part of yourself. So there's a struggle there for identity as the self and identity as the group. And I sound like I'm just talking out of my ass, but it's really interesting, I swear.
No, I know. Yeah, I know exactly where you are in this.
Mhm.
As in, I know the feeling from how you're talking. I know the feeling.
Yeah, I think it's not really talked about that much in fiction, especially because like the last thing I read that was actually first person plural was that Ayn Rand book, Anthem. And I didn't like the way this is like all of a sudden they broke away from the first person plural to first person is like this triumphant thing. And I'm like, well, yeah, but there's also a loneliness there. I think loneliness is a big core of what's going on in the story. So in a way too, it's also about speaking about like how we act online and the groups we get into online too, even though that's not directly said there, it's kind of that same feeling, especially when Twitter was like really big before Musk took it over, and like just being lost in that crowd and running with that crowd and stuff, and how sometimes the crowd can turn on people like in a heart, and like even the people that they're turning on for, like a bunch of people like, you know, turning on somebody that they thought insulted Neil Gaiman. He doesn't like that. He didn't want that. You know, it's just interesting how that whole thing, I just felt like I needed to dig into that, dig in deep.
All right. Anything else, Paul?
Nothing I can talk about yet. I mean, other than that one thing, but that's the Martian, the Martian colony supernatural story, but that's more like, it's just something I'm working on for fun. That's not contracted, so I could really talk about that. But everything else, it's hush hush though. But
okay,
those two I could talk about. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And where can people find you all?
I am only on Blue Sky. I'm not anywhere else.
I'm on Blue Sky as I think pauljessup.com. Yeah, because I could tie it to my actual domain name. You can find accounts for me on Twitter and everywhere else, but I don't go there. I just haven't deleted them yet. I'm probably going to go to, but I don't want to actually go onto Twitter to delete it, because the last time I went on Twitter, some people were like showing images of children like being like wounded and stuff to try and get people to side one way or another with the whole Israel-Hamas conflict. And I have no words. There was like one image. There's like tons of them all over the place, and obviously bot names and stuff. And I'm just like, I'm never going back there again. I can't do that. That's insane.
Totally fair. And Tade, I'm so glad that you're back on social media on Blue Sky again, because we missed you when you were gone. So
I just look, I sometimes, you know, I like the people that I regularly interact with. It's just that there's so many bad actors that I find it very, it's distracting. Like when, you know, it's distracting. I like to actually talk about geeky stuff. I really like, I write science fiction because I like science fiction. I write horror because I like horror.
Yeah.
You know, I like it, and I want to find people to talk to about it. I want to discuss things without it being partisan. Like, look, can't we just explore this, you know, and geek out over it? That's what I want.
Yeah.
That's what I want from a social platform. I'm not really there to market. I just want to talk to people who like the kind of things that I like.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually just thought about that the other day, and saying that Blue Sky right now is perfect for that, because it's so small that you can't really market on it. And I noticed that there's some people that are known for their marketing who aren't really, they got a Blue Sky account, but they're not really doing anything on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they think they don't understand that. Yeah, this is good to have conversation.
I have noticed the same thing. There are a number of people that really like to have on Blue Sky who have accounts, but never use them, you know, and so then I'm forced to go back to Twitter for the DMs or whatever, you know, sometimes Facebook or places I don't want to go to.
Yeah.
Let's call this episode. Guys, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. You guys have been great.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I thought we could continue for another hour or so, to be honest.
Oh God, yes.
Me too.
Yeah, bring us back.
Bring us back.
We have more to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. More stuff right now I'm even thinking of now. So yeah, definitely bring us back.
Okay, definitely.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much.
Bye.
And that was our discussion with Tade Thompson and Paul Jessup. Before we continue on, if you'd like to support us, don't forget we have a Patreon. You can find us at patreon.com if you'd like to help us monthly. If you don't want to help us monthly, but you still want to contribute some money, you can find us at Ko-fi. That's Kofi. And if it's not in the cards for you to donate any money, remember just to pass us along to your friends. If you know somebody who might be interested in what we're doing, let them know. You can also rate and review us anywhere that you listen to your podcast. That would also be very helpful. So since I'm alone today, I'll keep the outro short. But this is one of those conversations that makes me realize I have found my people. When I am the least read person in the room, it is a rare day. And this was indeed one of those days. Anyway, I hope at a minimum that you came away from this conversation with a new reading list and a new movie list. I was there taking notes the whole time, so I know that I did. And in regards to what I'm reading right now, just before this episode, I finished up some back issues of fantasy and science fiction magazine. Cherie Renee Thomas's work continues to amaze me, and frankly, a subscription is not that much. I highly encourage you all to go and get one. I'm also working on the 6th book of the Expanse series, Babylon's Ashes. That's been super fun. I've really enjoyed that series so far. I'm also in the middle of Paul's new collection, The Skinless Man Counts to 5 and Other Tales of the Macabre. Not my usual thing, but I have quite enjoyed it. I've found the stories to be surprising, disturbing, and just very, very strange. I'll have more about that in my next review column, as I intend to include that book there. I want to end with a quick announcement. If you haven't heard, Rick Claypool needed to pull back from the Spec Fic Partisan column, so we will be dropping that audio column in the future. That last episode that came out was our last one. We wish him our best. Please check out his new novel, Skull Slime Tentacle Witch War, which is coming out this year from Anxiety Press. Finally, replacing Rick's column, we will have Paul Jessup, who was just on, coming back to do a column on hope in horror. So look out for that too. Thanks for listening. We are keeping hope alive, one episode at a time. If This Goes On, Don't Panic is edited by Alan Bailey and produced by Ken Schrader. Our theme music is by Father Flamethrower, additional music by Christopher Snydrosky, and outro music by Sable Aradia. Intro by Dave Robinson. A special thanks to our guests, Tade Thompson and Paul Jessup. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you again soon.